Hello, third grade. This is your fraction math lesson for Tuesday the 5th. And today we're going to talk about focusing on equivalent fractions and fractions in their simplest form. So hopefully you have already copied down your two new terms on your fraction page in your math notebook. If you haven't, they're at the top of this form. And please do that, okay? So you have them in your notebook. All right, so what you're looking at here, the number 1 bar represents a whole. And then I have all these different pieces that represent different parts of one whole. So for example, I just have 2 pink strips which make 2 halves, one whole. And then down here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fifths that also represent the number 1. I'm just going to slide this 1/2 away, and I want to show you something before we get started. Notice how now the 1/5 don't quite fit the 1/2. So you can see that they sort of go over the edge here. So we would know that these two fractions are not a good matchup. They don't evenly fit within 1/2. So just keep that in mind as we work, okay? All right, so equivalent fractions, what does that mean? We can have different fractions that represent the same amount. So let's, for example, say Weston has 1/2 of this bar colored, okay? So what other fractions can represent this area of space? Well, let's take a look and let's start with 1/8. So I have my 1/8 and I'm going to put them in. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Now that looks nice and even. It matches up. Doesn't go over the edge. Okay, great. So we can say that these are equivalent because they represent the same amount of space. So we have eighths in the denominator, but how many are we going to put in the numerator? Let's go back. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4/8 can also represent 1/2. So let me write that. Hold on. Okay, so now we see that the area 1/2, an equivalent fraction for that would be 4/8. It's the same area, but different fraction. Okay, so what happens if we try to find another equivalent fraction? I know my 1/5 didn't quite fit, so let me try 1/6. I'll clear out these, and I'll put 1. I'm gonna go right to the corner to make sure that it fits, and it's the same area and space. Okay, yeah, that's a good fit. So my denominator will be 6ths, right? And how many are in the numerator? Let's count. 1, 2, 3. All right, so 3/6 would be an equivalent fraction to 1/2. So let me write that down in our list. So I said 3/6. Hang on one sec. Okay, so now we have 3 different fractions that are equivalent or equal to each other because they represent the same amount of space. And while I was paused, I put back my 1/8 so that you could see it's all the same amount of space, okay? So that's why they're equivalent. And we can say names for 1/2 are 4/8 and 3/6. Now, looking at these fractions, how do we figure out what the simplest form is of the fraction? So when we're talking about simplest form, we're talking about, can we divide, the operation is division, can we divide the numerator and the denominator by the same number and shrink our fraction down to the simplest form? So looking at these 3, we can see that we can use the number 2 here on 4/8. 2 goes into 4 and 2 goes into 8. So we know this is not the simplest form. We know that 3 and 6 can be simplified. So that would leave 1/2 as the simplest form. It can't be divided by any other number besides 1. So that makes it the simplest form. Okay, so we're going to practice one more to show you, just to get you real solid, and then you're going to finish your Google form and get some practice, okay? So hold tight. Okay, guys, this time we're going to use the benchmark fraction of 1/3. Last time we used the benchmark fraction of 1/2. Here's the area of 1/3. And let's see if 1/12 line up and cover the same area equally. Do they fit? Yeah, they look pretty good. Okay, great. So then we know the denominator is going to be 12, denominator down the bottom number. And let's count how many parts is in the numerator. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we can say 1/3 equals 4/12 because it takes 4/12 to cover that same area, right? So let me just pause it and write that in. Okay, so in that example, 1/3 would be equal to 4/12. They cover the same area and they're different fractions. They're equivalent fractions. Okay, so let's look at one more here. I want to show you two different ways to get these numbers, all right? So let's say we're starting with the fraction 4/6, okay? We have our 4/6 up here in our area, right? And let's see. One way we can find an equivalent fraction is we can add these 1/3 pieces. It looks like it covers the same area, so great. So now we know that it takes 1, 2, so 2 in the numerator, and we have thirds, so 3 goes in the denominator. So we know by using our fraction pieces that that's one way to get an equivalent fraction for 4/6. But what if you don't have these? What's another strategy? Another strategy is to get the simplest form is you divide the numerator and the denominator by the same divisor, the same number. So let's look on this side, okay? Now we have 4/6. All we have to do is divide by the same divisor, and I can see here that I put the wrong number. It has to be the same. So good, let me show you that. It has to be the same number, same divisor. So it would have to be a 2 here. So let's see. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Okay, great. That takes care of the numerator. 6 divided by 2 is 3. That takes care of the denominator. So we get the same fraction doing it both ways. Okay, just wanted to show you that, shrinking our fraction down into the simplest form. Let me put that 2 back in there so you can see it. Okay, so that's another strategy for you to find the simplest form. You find the divisor that can go into both parts of the fraction, the numerator and the denominator, equally. Okay, and you shrink it down till you can't shrink it anymore, and that's the simplest form. All right, so now you are going to do some practice problems and finish your Google form up and submit it to me, and we'll work on this again tomorrow, okay? Great job listening. See you next time.